It was one of those sleepy autumn mornings in Cedar Hollow, the kind where the fog rolls in like a memory, and the coffee tastes more like ritual than necessity. Robert Bobby Callahan, 67, sat in his usual spot on the back porch, wrapped in a worn-out flannel and nursing a chipped mug that read, "World's okayest grandpa." A cardinal landed on the fence post, and for a moment the world stood still. His flip phone buzzed. Not rang. Not pinged. Buzzed, in that strange, almost apologetic way that old phones do when they don't belong in the present anymore. Bobby blinked at it. A text. That was rare. He only ever got messages from his daughter, sometimes his grandson, and the occasional "Happy Veterans Day" from the VA. But this wasn't from anyone in his contacts. Leave town by Friday. Trust the red truck. S. He stared at the screen, confused. No number, just a blur of symbols. No context. Just an eerie warning that sat too heavy for such a light morning. He chuckled dryly. Spam, he muttered, trying to shake off the chill crawling down his spine. But deep down, something didn't sit right. Cedar Hollow hadn't changed much since he came back. That's what he liked about it. But something about that message, it was like someone reached through time and tugged at his collar. He finished his coffee. The breeze picked up. And somewhere far off, a dog barked 3 times, and then fell silent. Bobby slipped the phone into his pocket and shuffled inside. His house smelled like old wood, faint tobacco, and a touch of mothballs, memories etched into every corner. His wife, Margaret, had passed 5 years ago, but the house still held her presence, like an unfinished song that played softly beneath the silence. He made his way to the living room, where photos lined the mantel, a sepia-toned wedding picture from 1968, a grainy shot of his Marine Corps unit back in '72, and a faded Polaroid of his daughter, Emily, smiling wide on her high school graduation day. Those were the good years, before the silence crept in. Emily had been worried about him lately, calling every few days, trying to drag him into the modern world of smartphones and social media. But Bobby preferred the quiet. He liked the rhythm of his days, coffee, crossword puzzles, the occasional fishing trip with his old war buddy, Jim. Still, that message gnawed at him. He had learned long ago to trust his gut, especially after serving in Vietnam. War taught him that silence often spoke louder than words, and shadows sometimes carried warnings. He dialed Emily's number but got voicemail. He left a brief message, careful to sound normal, hiding the strange message buzzing in his mind. "Hey just checking in. Call me when you get a chance." As he hung up, a second text came through. "The red truck will save you. But only if you choose to see it. S." Bobby's heart thumped. Who was S? And why did it feel like a bridge between past and present, a second chance or a warning he couldn't ignore? The afternoon sun stretched lazily through the lace curtains, casting warm patterns on the worn hardwood floor. Bobby sat at the kitchen table, the phone in front of him like a strange relic he couldn't put down. He hadn't felt this unsettled since Margaret's funeral. He reached for the old wooden box under the table, the one where he kept letters from his youth, letters from boot camp, handwritten notes from Margaret during their courtship, and a stack of postcards from Emily when she traveled after college. His fingers trembled as he picked one up, a black and white photo of a dusty road with a red truck parked under a giant oak tree. It was taken in the summer of 1976, the summer he and Margaret escaped to a little cabin outside town before Emily was born. A sudden wave of loneliness hit him. His world had shrunk over the years, friends moved away or passed on, and the silence around him deepened. Emily's calls were lifelines, but even those had started to feel like distant echoes. He dialed her number again. This time, she answered. "Hey, Dad! Everything okay? Hey, I got some strange texts today. From someone I don't know. They're telling me to leave town, something about a red truck." Emily's voice softened. "Dad, you sure you're not just spooked by those old stories you like to tell? You know about the town, the past?" "Maybe," he said. "But it's not just the texts. It feels like a warning. Emily hesitated. All right, Dad. Just be careful, okay? Maybe check with Jim or someone. He nodded, grateful. For a moment, the distance between them shrank. Thanks, Em. Love you. Love you too, Dad. Bobby hung up and stared out the window, watching the leaves fall like fragments of forgotten times. Somewhere in that quiet town, the past was stirring, and the red truck was waiting. Bobby's boots crunched on the gravel driveway as he walked over to Jim's place, a weathered farmhouse just a few blocks away. Jim, his closest friend from the Marines and his partner in countless fishing trips and late-night talks, was the one person who still understood the shadows that clung to their memories. Jim opened the door before Bobby could even knock. Hey, old man, he joked, his face breaking into a grin beneath a salt and pepper beard. Morning, Jim, Bobby replied, trying to sound casual. But inside, his nerves were tangled. They settled on the creaky porch, the smell of pine and earth wrapping around them like a familiar blanket. Bobby pulled out his phone. Got some weird text today. From someone named S. Told me to leave town by Friday. Something about a red truck. Jim frowned, eyes narrowing. You think it's a prank? Doesn't feel like one. It's got that same feeling you get before a storm. You know, when the air gets thick and quiet. Jim shook his head slowly. We're old, Bobby. Maybe the world's just playing tricks on us. No, Bobby said firmly. I've seen enough storms, both outside and inside, to know when something's off. They sat silently, the weight of decades hanging between them. Then Jim reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded newspaper clipping. You remember this? Bobby unfolded it. The headline read, Truck crash on Highway 12, tragedy strikes small town. The photo showed a battered red pickup truck, crumpled against a tree. That was 20 years ago, Bobby murmured. Johnny Miller's accident. Jim nodded. Seems like the past isn't done with us yet. Bobby's fingers tightened around the clipping. Maybe it's time we faced it. That evening, Bobby sat by the window, the newspaper clipping spread out before him like a puzzle piece he hadn't wanted to fit. Johnny Miller's face stared back at him, young, vibrant, full of promise before the crash ended it all. Johnny had been the son of Mrs. Miller, the town's postmistress, a woman who had always greeted Bobby with a kind smile during his youth. Bobby remembered the summer of '78, when he and Johnny were just teenagers, sneaking out to the old baseball field, dreaming about futures far beyond Cedar Hollow. But Johnny never got to leave. The red truck, his pride and joy, was wrecked that night on Highway 12, and the boy inside never woke up. Bobby's phone buzzed again. Another message from S. You knew Johnny. You know what's coming. His heart tightened. How did this stranger know? And why was he being drawn back into a story that had long haunted the town's collective memory? He thought of Emily, his daughter, and the years he'd spent trying to protect her from the harsh realities of his past. He'd carried his own guilt like a stone in his chest, survivor's guilt from the war, and now this new weight pressing down. Maybe it's time to stop running, Bobby whispered to the empty room. Outside, the wind picked up, shaking the branches of the oak tree under which the red truck had once rested, like a sentinel waiting for its story to be told. That night, the house was quiet except for the slow tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. Bobby sat in his favorite armchair, the glow of a single lamp casting long shadows across the walls. The text messages weighed on his mind, but more than that, the memories they stirred. He reached for the old rotary phone on the side table, the one Margaret had always kept just for emergencies. The number for Jim was etched faintly on a scrap of paper taped underneath. The line clicked, and then Jim's gruff voice answered. Bobby? It's late. What's going on? Bobby hesitated, then told Jim everything, the texts, the warnings, the red truck, the past creeping back. Jim listened, silence hanging between each word. Finally, he said, Sounds like someone's trying to get your attention. Maybe it's more than just a prank. I don't know, Jim. It's like the past and present are colliding. I'm not sure if I'm ready for whatever's coming. You never were, Bobby. None of us were. Bobby chuckled softly, the sound filled with decades of shared pain and friendship. Hang tight, Jim said. We'll figure it out. Together. As Bobby hung up, his phone buzzed again, but this time, the message was different. Look for the light in the old barn. Time's running out. Bobby's breath caught. The old barn had been abandoned for years, a relic of Cedar Hollow's farming past. But it was also where he and Jim had once hidden from a summer storm, where secrets were whispered and promises made. Tonight the past wasn't just calling, it was demanding. Morning came slowly in Cedar Hollow, the sky painted soft pink and orange. Bobby stood before the old barn at the edge of town, its wooden beams weathered and cracked, vines crawling up like fingers holding onto memories. His heart pounded as he pushed the creaking door open. Dust floated in sunbeams, settling over rusted tools and forgotten crates. The scent of hay and old earth filled the air, the smell of a life long gone but never quite forgotten. He flicked on his flashlight and swept the beam across the floor. That's when he saw it, a faint glow beneath a pile of old tarps. Kneeling, Bobby pulled the cloth away to reveal a battered toolbox, its metal corners rusted but intact. Inside lay a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon, yellowed photographs, and a small notebook. His fingers trembled as he picked up the notebook, worn leather, scrawled handwriting. He opened it to the first page. The words were familiar, Johnny Miller's handwriting, detailing dreams of leaving Cedar Hollow, warnings about a danger that's coming. A chill ran through Bobby. Johnny hadn't just been a victim of a crash. He had known something, maybe even tried to warn the town. Bobby sank to the dusty floor, the weight of decades pressing down. Could this be the second chance, not just for Johnny, but for him, for Cedar Hollow? The barn seemed to hold its breath as Bobby read on, the past whispering its secrets into the quiet morning light. Bobby sat cross-legged on the cold barn floor, clutching the notebook like a fragile lifeline. Johnny's words were raw, desperate, a young man who saw shadows where others saw only sunlight. He wrote about strange accidents, unexplained phone calls, and a mysterious red truck that seemed to appear before disasters struck. Bobby's mind raced back to the countless times he'd felt unease in Cedar Hollow, moments brushed off as old man's nerves. But Johnny's warnings made those feelings undeniable. The notebook ended abruptly, the last page smeared with ink. It was a message, a plea. Find the truth before it's too late. Bobby's phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a text but a call. His hand trembled as he answered. "S," a voice whispered, fragile but urgent. "You're close. Don't stop now." "Who are you?" Bobby asked, voice cracking. "No time. Just trust the red truck. It's waiting for you." The line went dead. Loneliness gnawed at him, but beneath it, a fierce determination burned. Bobby knew the truth was tangled with his own story, the lives he'd lived, and the family he wanted to protect. As the sun climbed higher, the old barn seemed less like a place of ghosts and more like the crossroads of second chances. Bobby drove slowly down the cracked highway, the notebook resting on the passenger seat beside him. Memories surged like waves, faces, places, moments he tried to tuck away. Johnny's story was unraveling, pulling him deeper into a mystery tied not only to a red truck but to the lives they'd all tried to forget. He stopped at the diner where he and Jim used to grab coffee after early morning fishing trips. The bell jingled as he stepped inside, eyes scanning the room filled with familiar faces weathered by time. Behind the counter stood Ruth, the waitress who had known Bobby since he was a boy. "Well, if it isn't Bobby Callahan," she said with a smile that held decades of warmth and unspoken history. "Morning, Ruth," Bobby replied, settling into a booth by the window. "I'm looking for some answers, and maybe a little courage." She poured coffee without asking and slid a plate of pie toward him. "You'll find both here sometimes." Their conversation drifted to Johnny Miller, how the accident had cast a shadow over the town, how some folks believed it was more than just a tragic crash. Bobby's voice softened. "Johnny was like a brother. And now, I think he was trying to warn us." Ruth nodded, eyes distant. "There's a reason old wounds never fully heal, Bobby. Maybe it's time to face them before they tear us apart. As Bobby left the diner, the sky darkened slightly, a storm brewing on the horizon. The red truck wasn't just a vehicle, it was a symbol of past mistakes, second chances, and the justice still waiting to be served. That evening, Bobby sat in the dim light of his living room, the notebook open on his lap. The house felt too quiet without Margaret, and tonight the silence seemed heavier than usual. The weight of the past pressed down on him, and for the first time in days, he felt the familiar sting of loneliness. His phone buzzed. It was Emily. "Dad, I've been thinking about what you said," she began, voice gentle but worried. "These messages, the red truck, it sounds dangerous. Are you sure you want to dig into this?" Bobby took a deep breath. "Sometimes the past catches up whether we want it to or not. I have to know, Em. For Johnny. For the town. For us." Emily sighed. "Just promise me you'll be careful. I don't want to lose you too." He smiled, a bittersweet curve of his lips. "You won't. I'm coming back. I always come back." They talked longer, sharing memories and fears, bridging the gap that years and distance had stretched. For a moment, Bobby felt connected, the loneliness easing like the first light after a long night. But as he hung up, the phone buzzed again. A new message. "Time's almost up. Find the red truck before it's too late. S." Bobby's jaw tightened. The clock was ticking. And the second chance he'd been given demanded action, even if it meant facing the darkest corners of Cedar Hollow and his own heart. That night, Bobby wrapped himself in his old leather jacket, the one with the worn Marine Corps patch sewn on the sleeve, and grabbed a flashlight. The moon hung low, casting silvery light over Cedar Hollow's empty streets. The town felt different at night, quieter, yes, but also heavier, like the shadows carried secrets waiting to be uncovered. He headed toward the edge of town, where the old Miller farm sat abandoned. The place where Johnny's red truck had met its fate. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, memories mixing with the present like ghosts lingering just out of sight. As he approached the rusted gate, a chill ran down his spine. He paused, fingers tightening around the flashlight. The beam swept across the yard, landing on a familiar silhouette, the red truck, surprisingly intact despite the years. Bobby's breath caught. How had it stayed hidden all this time? He stepped closer, the crunch of gravel loud in the stillness. The truck's paint was faded, windows cracked, but the license plate still read. JMM 1976. Johnny's initials. Inside the cab, Bobby found a folded envelope taped under the dashboard. With trembling hands, he opened it. Inside was a letter in Johnny's handwriting, dated just days before the crash. "If you're reading this, it means someone finally listened. There's more to this story, people who want to keep the truth buried. Be careful. Trust those who've been here all along." Bobby's heart pounded. This wasn't just a message, it was a call to action, a plea for justice. He knew what he had to do. The next morning, Bobby sat across from Jim at the local diner, the letter spread out on the table like a secret map. Jim's eyes flickered with a mixture of surprise and resolve as he read Johnny's words. "Looks like this goes deeper than we thought," Jim said quietly. "There were people in town back then who didn't want anyone asking questions, powerful folks." Bobby nodded. "Johnny must have gotten too close to something. Maybe even someone who wanted to protect their own interests, no matter the cost." They both knew the town's unspoken rules: silence, loyalty, and the slow erasure of inconvenient truths. But Bobby also saw something else, a chance for redemption, not just for Johnny, but for himself and Cedar Hollow. Later that day, Bobby found himself sitting on the porch, the notebook and letter in hand. His mind wandered to Margaret, how she'd always pushed him to face life head-on, never to run from pain or fear. He whispered to the wind, "This is for you, Margaret. For all the second chances we never got." The phone buzzed again, one last message from S. "You're not alone. The town remembers. Justice will come." Bobby's heart swelled with a strange mix of hope and fear. The past was no longer just a memory. It was a living, breathing force. And he was ready to face it. That afternoon, Bobby made his way to the town hall, the heartbeat of Cedar Hollow's community, where whispers of the past still lingered beneath polite nods and forced smiles. He knew this wouldn't be easy. Digging up old stories meant stirring up old wounds, some better left untouched. Inside, he found Mayor Thompson, a stern man in his 70s whose eyes had seen the town's many changes but always guarded its secrets. "Mayor, I need to talk about Johnny Miller's accident," Bobby said quietly, placing the notebook and letter on the desk. Thompson's face hardened. "That was a long time ago, Bobby. Best not to dredge it up." Bobby met his gaze. "Johnny's death wasn't an accident. I'm here to find the truth. For him, for the town." The mayor's jaw tightened. "Careful where you poke, Callahan. Some things come with a price." As Bobby left the office, the weight of the warning pressed down hard. But he also felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years: purpose. Later, at the diner, Ruth pulled him aside. "You're stirring up ghosts, Bobby. But maybe the town needs that. We all carry our own burdens." Bobby nodded. "I want to carry mine differently." The sun dipped low, casting long shadows as the town braced itself for what was coming. Cedar Hollow was at a crossroads, and Bobby was leading the charge toward a reckoning long overdue. Word spread quickly through Cedar Hollow. Bobby was asking questions no one wanted answered. That evening, as he walked down Main Street, a heavy silence greeted him. Windows shuttered earlier than usual, and even the friendly waves from neighbors felt forced, distant. At Jim's house, the tension was thick. Jim ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Bobby, some folks don't want the past stirred up. You've got to be careful." Bobby's jaw set. "I'm done being careful, Jim. If the truth means losing some friends, so be it." The two men sat in silence, memories of their youth mingling with the harsh realities of the present. It was clear the town was drawing lines in the sand. Later that night, Bobby's phone buzzed again. Another message from S. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It's acting despite it." He stared at the words, feeling a strange kinship with whoever sent them. For the first time, he believed this journey wasn't just his alone. There was a kindness, a justice weaving through the chaos. Bobby looked out the window, the stars faint behind a veil of clouds. He whispered, "For second chances, then." 2 nights later, Bobby was sitting on his porch when a shadow approached. It was Mr. Harlan, the town's wealthy landowner, a man whose influence had long shaped Cedar Hollow's fate. "Harlan," Bobby said, steady but wary. The older man smiled thinly. "I hear you're digging where you shouldn't." Bobby met his cold gaze. "Johnny's death wasn't an accident. You know that." Harlan's smile faded. "Some truths come at a price, Callahan. You want to shake the foundations of this town? Be prepared to face the consequences." Bobby's hands clenched into fists. "I'm ready." Harlan leaned closer. "Remember, it's not just you. Think about your family. Your daughter." The warning hung in the night air, thick and heavy. Bobby's mind flashed to Emily, her worry, her love, and he felt a new resolve. "I'm not afraid anymore," he said quietly. "This town deserves justice." As Harlan turned and walked away, Bobby knew the battle was only beginning. But for the first time in years, he felt alive. The next morning, Bobby sat at his kitchen table, sunlight filtering softly through the window. His hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee, but his thoughts were with Emily. He dialed her number, heart pounding. "Dad?" Emily's voice was cautious. "I had a visitor last night. Harlan came by." There was a pause. "Are you okay?" "I am. But I wanted you to know. Whatever comes, I'm doing this for us, for you, for Mom, for Johnny, for everyone who deserves a second chance." Emily's voice cracked, touched by his strength and vulnerability. "I'm proud of you, Dad. Just promise me you'll be safe." Bobby smiled, the weight on his shoulders feeling lighter, shared. "I promise." They talked for a while longer, bridging the distance years had put between them. And for the first time in a long time, Bobby felt connected, not just to his daughter, but to the life he'd fought to protect. Outside, the old oak tree swayed gently in the breeze, as if nodding in approval. The past was no longer just a memory. It was a living story, one that Bobby was ready to rewrite. Days passed, and Bobby found himself growing more isolated by the minute. Some townsfolk whispered behind his back, while others avoided him altogether. Yet, amid the growing shadows, an unexpected knock came at his door. It was Sarah Miller, Johnny's younger sister, a woman Bobby hadn't seen since they were kids. Her eyes were tired but filled with quiet determination. "I heard what you're doing," she said softly. "I want to help." Bobby blinked, surprise warming his chest. "Why now, Sarah?" She looked away briefly, then back. "Because I never believed Johnny's death was just an accident. And because it's time someone spoke the truth." Together, they pored over Johnny's notebook and letters, Sarah filling in pieces Bobby had missed, stories of whispered threats, strange visitors, and a town afraid to face its own demons. For the first time, Bobby felt the power of connection, that even in the deepest loneliness, there could be kindness, loyalty, and hope. They agreed to meet the next night, ready to uncover the secrets that had bound Cedar Hollow for decades. Under a silver moon, Bobby and Sarah met by the old barn, the notebook and letters spread between them on the rough wooden table. The air was thick with anticipation and the scent of damp earth. Sarah's voice trembled as she revealed more. There were whispers about illegal dealings, Mr. Harlan using his influence to cover things up. Johnny found out too much. Bobby nodded grimly. That explains the warnings, the threats. And the red truck, the symbol of a warning. Suddenly, headlights cut through the darkness. A pickup truck slowed nearby, red paint chipped and faded, unmistakably the same one. The driver's window rolled down, revealing an older man with kind eyes. "Thought you might need some help," he said. "Name's Frank. Used to be a cop around here." Bobby and Sarah exchanged wary glances but welcomed the ally. With Frank's knowledge and their determination, the pieces began to fall into place. The night stretched on, the trio's whispered plans weaving hope into the heavy night air. Cedar Hollow's ghosts were waking, and so were its defenders. The dawn light filtered through the cracked windows of the town hall as Bobby, Sarah, and Frank gathered evidence, old documents, photos, and whispered confessions long buried. The truth was more tangled than they'd imagined, illegal land deals, cover-ups, and a trail of silence stretching back decades. Bobby's hands shook as he held a letter signed by Mayor Thompson, implicating him in the cover-up. The weight of betrayal cut deep. "Why would they do this?" Sarah asked, voice breaking. "Power," Frank said grimly. "And fear. They thought silencing Johnny would keep everything safe. But safety had come at a cost. Lives lost, families broken, and a town living in quiet despair." As the trio prepared to confront the town, Bobby felt the sting of loneliness but also the warmth of connection. This was more than justice. It was healing. He thought of Emily, of Margaret, of Johnny, all the second chances still possible. Outside, the sun rose over Cedar Hollow, promising a new day. The town hall meeting was packed. Faces lined with years of hardship, suspicion, and hope filled every seat. Bobby stood at the podium, the evidence laid bare before Cedar Hollow. He spoke with steady voice, telling Johnny's story, not just the tragedy, but the courage, the warnings, and the cost of silence. He named those responsible and called on the town to reclaim its soul. Tears shimmered in Emily's eyes as she sat in the crowd, her father's strength filling the room. Old wounds ached, but in the shared pain was the promise of healing. Mayor Thompson was forced to resign. Mr. Harlan's grip loosened. The town, once shackled by fear, began to breathe again. Bobby looked out at the faces, neighbors, old friends, new allies, and felt a quiet joy. "I lost much in my life," he said, voice thick with emotion. "But I've learned this: it's never too late for second chances. For kindness. For justice. For connection." As the meeting ended, Bobby stepped outside. The sun warmed his face, the breeze carrying the scent of blooming oak trees. Loneliness had given way to hope. Cedar Hollow was no longer a place haunted by the past, but a community ready to embrace the future, together.